Imagine kneeling down in perfect silence. You're dressed in white, a color symbolizing purity and death. You take a small blade, not even the length of your forearm, and plunge it into your own abdomen. You slice from left to right. Slowly, precisely. Your face doesn't twitch, your breathing barely changes. Then someone behind you raises a sword and, with one motion, takes your head. This wasn't madness. This was ceremony. This was honor. Welcome to the ritual of Seppuku, where dignity mattered more than blood, and where wasn't seen as weakness, but as the last act of strength. Today we'll unravel the story of the samurai, the truth, not the Netflix-filtered fantasy, but the raw, historical, disturbing, disciplined, and devastating life behind the armor. Stay with me until Chapter 5, where we reveal 3 shocking truths about seppuku you've probably never heard. And if you make it to the end, we'll unpack what this ritual really says about us today. Chapter 1. The Real Samurai. Let's get this out of the way. Most of what you think you know about samurai is historical fan fiction. The stoic warrior meditating under waterfalls, writing haikus between battlefield duels, and slicing through injustice like a katana through silk. Romantic nonsense, mostly. The truth? The samurai class, or bushi, emerged around the 10th century, when landowners in Japan began hiring warriors to protect their estates from bandits, pirates, and rival clans. Over time, these hired swords became a hereditary caste, elevated to power not just through bloodshed, but through bureaucracy. Most samurai weren't wandering sword masters. They were administrators, tax collectors, enforcers of local rule. Yes, they were trained to fight, and yes, they carried swords. But many spent more time managing ledgers than slicing enemies. Their education included poetry, calligraphy, and Confucian ethics. They studied strategy, philosophy, and literature. Children born into samurai families began martial training early, but also learned to recite classical Chinese texts and adhere to strict codes of behavior. In a typical day, a samurai might inspect rice stores, resolve a peasant dispute, write a letter to a superior, and train in swordsmanship. War was not constant, but readiness had to be. Chapter 2. A Day in the Life. The daily rhythm of a samurai life was structured almost monk-like. Discipline wasn't optional. It was oxygen. The day often began before dawn. Physical conditioning, sword drills, archery on horseback, yabusame, and tactical exercises filled the morning. Meals were modest: steamed rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, and grilled fish. Seasonal ingredients: minimal spice. Food was not pleasure. It was fuel. Afternoons were for studies, military strategy, Chinese classics, moral philosophy. The Bushido ideal demanded balance. A warrior should be both deadly and thoughtful, strong and selfless. A blade in one hand, a brush in the other. They also practiced ritual. The tea ceremony, chanoyu, wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a lesson in presence, patience, and restraint. How one drank tea revealed more than how one wielded a sword. Chapter 3. Seppuku, the final act. Seppuku, often mistranslated as simply suicide, was not an impulsive act. It was a codified ritual, an expression of ultimate agency, and the most intimate statement of honor. The ritual typically began with the writing of a death poem, a final, composed reflection on life, duty, and acceptance. Then, in front of witnesses, the samurai would kneel, disrobed to the waist, and open his stomach with a short blade called a tanto. Why the abdomen? Because it was believed the soul resided there. To slice open one's belly was to show one's inner self, literally and symbolically. A second, called the kaishakunin, would stand behind, usually a trusted friend, tasked with decapitating the samurai once the belly was cut, to spare prolonged suffering. It was not a punishment. It was a privilege, reserved for the noble, denied to criminals. Psychology. Interlude. Modern psychology might interpret seppuku as a hyper-controlled coping mechanism for shame. In a collectivist society where your reputation was your identity, the public loss of face was existential. To die with dignity preserved your family's name and your own sense of coherence. We're not done yet. Stay until Chapter 7, where we explore how the very system that raised these warriors would also dismantle them, and what their death meant in the face of Western modernization. Chapter 4. Why they did it. Not all seppuku was the same. There were several types: judicial seppuku, ordered by a lord as a more honorable alternative to execution; voluntary seppuku, to atone for a mistake or failure, even when not ordered; protest seppuku, to challenge a policy or condemn a superior's action; junshi, committing suicide to follow one's lord in death, a controversial but once practiced form of extreme loyalty. In each case, the common thread wasn't death, it was control. The samurai didn't fear death, they feared dishonor. Their bodies were mortal, their names had to be eternal. Chapter 5. Shocking facts you didn't know. Seppuku was sometimes used as political manipulation. Lords could subtly pressure retainers to commit suicide rather than executing them, maintaining the illusion of loyalty and preserving reputation. Not all seppuku was successful. Some samurai hesitated or botched the cut. Others didn't die quickly, forcing the second to make a difficult choice: when to intervene. There were samurai manuals on how to perform seppuku properly, written guidelines instructed on posture, breathing, blade angle, even the emotional state to maintain. The aesthetics of your death mattered. Chapter 6. The Meiji Restoration. The 19th century hit Japan like a cannonball through a paper screen. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration overthrew the Tokugawa shogunate. The emperor was restored, and Japan began an unprecedented sprint toward modernization. Western clothing, railroads, military conscription, and industrial capitalism began replacing centuries-old systems. The samurai class was abolished. Their stipends were cut. Their swords were banned in public. A symbol of elite warriorhood became contraband overnight. Many adapted, becoming businessmen, teachers, or government officials. But others couldn't stomach the dishonor. Some committed seppuku in protest. They felt betrayed by the very country they had served. Their death was their final resistance. Chapter 7. Legacy in Modern Times. Today, Bushido is often evoked in martial arts, leadership books, anime, and nationalist rhetoric. But it's a sanitized version. A shell. The violence, the suffering, the impossible standards. Those are cropped out like a bad angle in a profile picture. We celebrate the discipline, but ignore the emotional repression. We romanticize the loyalty, but forget the suicides. We quote their honor, but refuse to live with that level of accountability. Now let's summarize it. So why did samurai commit ritual? Because for them, shame was a fate worse than death. Because death was something you could choose, control, master. And in a world where we now measure ourselves in likes, filters, and curated self-images, their obsession with dying well is both horrifying and weirdly familiar. Subscribe for more unfiltered warrior history, psychological deep dives, and brutally honest storytelling. This was Warrior Vebjorn, and you've just walked through the final curtain of honor.